Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for, well, a genuine historical deep dive. We're following a traveler whose journey wasn't just physical, but deeply cultural. We're in the footsteps of G.T. Vigne, an English traveler who, back in 1836, made a very deliberate choice.
He really did.
He decided to skip the easier, the safer route through Punjab, and instead joined these massive, volatile Lohani caravans. They were traveling from Multan, across the treacherous Sulaimani Mountains, all the way to Kabul.
And it's an extraordinary decision, which is why we get such an extraordinary primary source from it. I mean, Vigne's travelogue, it captures this region, this true artery of Central Asian commerce, right before major European involvement changed everything.
So our mission today is to use his observations as a kind of shortcut, right? To understand the sheer scale of the trade, the unique customs of these Lohani merchants, and the daily, really life or death challenges they faced. Okay, so let's unpack Vigne's mindset first. He'd been exploring Kashmir and Little Tibet, and he intentionally waits around in Ludhiana. He was staying with the Captain Wade, specifically for these legendary kafilas, or caravans, to form up.
Right, but before he even gets into the dust and the danger, he has this profound political introduction that just perfectly sets the stage.
It's literally meeting the ghosts of the Afghan Empire.
Yes, right there in the relative safety of British protection. He gets introduced to the pensioned ex-kings, Shah Shuja, and the blind Shah Zaman. Vigne noted Shah Shuja was carried himself more like a gentleman who'd simply lost an estate than a monarch who'd lost a whole kingdom.
Wow. But it's that interaction with the blind Shah Zaman, that's the moment that just defines the tragedy he's about to travel into.
Oh, absolutely. Vigne is describing the beauty of Kashmir to the blind monarch, and all he can reply with is this heart-wrenching sigh. He just says, "Kabul, Kabul. What is Kashmir to Kabul, and I shall never see it again." And that single line, it just underscores the deep emotional gravity of the land Vigne was heading towards. It was a place of profound loss, but also fierce loyalty.
So he leaves that political drama behind and heads right into the heat. He arrives in Multan, the reputed capital of the ancient Malali people, ready to finally meet the caravan. And Multan, it had this reputation for being notoriously hot and dry.
It did, but Vigne, he caught a rare break. His first 10 days were actually cooled by showers, so the thermometer averaged a pretty comfortable 76 degrees in the shade.
That's a deceptive start.
A very deceptive calm. He learned pretty quickly that his luck was temporary. He notes that later in the journey, near a place called Shankul, the heat becomes a central character. It hits a brutal 118 degrees inside his tent.
A 42-degree swing. That's incredible. That kind of intensity must define everything, right? The architecture, the pace of life.
Everything. Multan itself, he said, was a dusty, slovenly city of about 45,000 people, mostly built of sunburnt brick, with a fort on a high mound.
And that brings us to the landscape just outside the city, which Vigne found just as compelling. He was really focused on these immense dheras, or mounds, scattered across the plain.
Yes, these hillocks, some 30 to 80 feet high, they were just covered in broken bricks, tiles, Hindu ornaments. He concluded they had to be the ruins of old villages, of protected forts.
What's so compelling is his explanation for how they became giant mounds. It's not just a pile of rubble.
No, this is Vigne, the geologist, at work. He theorized that when a settlement was abandoned, because of drought or raids or whatever, the houses, which were usually just mudworks, would crumble and wash away.
Right.
But the solid stone core of the village fort would remain standing. And that fort then acted as a nucleus for these huge banks of sand and dust, driven violently by the tufans, the sudden, powerful storms of the region.
So these mounds are time capsules. They're created by architecture and extreme climate working together.
Yeah.
It's like a physical demonstration of how fleeting civilization is against the power of nature.
Exactly, and it gives the whole journey this slightly eerie, haunted quality right from the very beginning.
Before he leaves Multan, Vigne stops at the shrine of the fakir Shams-i-Tabriz. The story there is fascinating.
It's a remarkable piece of folklore. The holy man, he's frustrated because he's been denied a meal, so he summons the sundown to cook his dinner in its rays.
Wow.
It speaks to a belief system where spiritual power is immediate and intensely physical. And Vigne connects Shams-i-Tabriz to the Sufis, these Oriental philosophers who believed profoundly in one God, and crucially, in the doctrine of predestination.
And that doctrine of predestination, that becomes the key spiritual context for the people he's about to travel with.
It is. The Sufis often denied future rewards or punishments. They believed the soul would simply be reabsorbed into the divine. And this deep sense of fate, it provides the foundation for the bravery and sometimes the reckless action of the Lohanis.
Speaking of action, let's get to the real men of business, the Lohanis themselves. Who were these people?
They were the undisputed masters of this trade corridor. Their origins trace back to a Muslim shepherd who lived around the time of Mahmud of Ghazni. So they have basically been trading between Hindustan and Kabul ever since. Centuries-old experts of this path.
And Vigne joins the largest of the 3 annual caravans.
He does, and the scale is just staggering. This isn't just regional trade. This is a global supply chain operating through deserts and mountains.
So what were they hauling?
The list shows you just how interconnected the world was, even in 1836. Coming in from India, they had high-value luxury goods. Kimkab, which is golden cloth from Benares, English chintzes and calicos, and vital supplies like gun locks.
They're going out
From Bokhara and Kabul. They brought back raw silk Vigne estimates. Multan alone used 700 mons a year, plus horses, cochineal, pomegranates, almonds, raisins, high-demand stuff.
And Vigne connects this to the broader European market, which is, that's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, he does. He deduces that a lot of these goods didn't even stop in Kabul. They went beyond the Hindu Kush, potentially reaching St. Macaire on the Russian frontier.
So you have goods moving at the speed of a camel, yet linking Calcutta, Delhi, Kabul, and Russia. It's a system built on incredible efficiency and incredible risk.
Absolutely. And despite this intense capitalist focus on commodities, Vigne notes they retained these very elaborate, beautiful cultural formalities, especially in how they greeted each other.
The salutations.
The Lohani salutations they're almost a choreographed ritual. When friends or relatives met, they'd do the oriental embrace head over the left shoulder, then the right. Then comes the sequence of questions.
Shajer, are you well? Sheh Pakir, are you strong? And Rogushe, are you safe?
And each one is answered with the same question back, followed by a final embrace. It's a way of saying, I see you, I acknowledge you, and I am affirming your safety in this incredibly dangerous world.
And that formality, it even extended to their business dealings, especially their unique method of debt collection.
Yes, it relied on a strict adherence to the laws of hospitality.
Okay, I love this. So if a poor man owed them money, what did they do?
The creditor, often with his friends, would just take up residence in the debtor's house.
You're kidding.
Not at all. They would treat him with perfect courtesy, but they would simply remain as guests, polite, unmoving guests, until the cash was forthcoming. The social pressure of hospitality required the host to feed them, accommodate them indefinitely. It compelled payment without any violence.
That is passive aggression elevated to a high art.
It was remarkably effective because the cultural imperative to be a good host was stronger than the desire to keep the money. It's a system built entirely on shame and social contract, not legal enforcement.
That tells you a lot about how tight-knit their community was. And that community also included the women of the Zunas. Vigne saw them riding on the marches.
Yes, the ladies rode on these square, cushioned platforms on top of the camels. They wore dark robes and mantillas, which made them look like European nuns from a distance. Vigne noted that over time, as they grew less shy, their features were fine, and many were surprisingly fair-skinned, often the offspring of female slaves purchased north of the Hindu Kush. So the caravan was both a moving fortress and a melting pot.
And that fortress needed some serious defense, because this journey was defined by constant conflict. We have to talk about the bloody daily feud with the Vuziri mountaineers.
This was the major tax on their journey. The feud started because the Lohanis flatly refused to pay passage rights through the mountains.
Even though Vigne says they paid taxes and tolls everywhere else, from Calcutta all the way to Russia.
Exactly.
So why refuse this one payment? It seems strategically foolish.
It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle of their mercantile independence. The Lohani saw the Vuziri's demands as extortion, a tax on the mountaineer basically. They preferred to spend blood and treasure fighting them than to concede that right.
And the Vuziris retaliated brutally.
Oh, daily. Vigne describes daily theft, 30 camels stolen at once, the diversion of life-sustaining water courses, and murder. He documented 2 men killed by swords at night near a place called Manjiura.
And you could see the cost of this feud along the path.
You could. The graves of fallen Lohanis were marked by these pathetic memorials. Piles of stones, sticks, animal horns, placed there by their comrades. It was constant visual tally of the human cost of keeping that trade route open on their own terms.
And amidst all this conflict and the brutal heat, we're talking 118 degrees in his tent. Vigne, the natural historian, is still noting the unique fauna and strange remedies of the mountains.
His observation on the marker goat is a perfect example of science meeting folklore. He got the skin of this gigantic animal, 5 feet 8 inches long, with these huge 31-inch spiral horns.
But it's the local lore that's so bizarre.
The serpent eater.
Yeah.
The locals swore that the marker seized snakes by the tail and just swallowed them whole. Vigne doesn't, vouch for the story, but it captures the fierce energy of the mountain people.
He also delved into their ancient medical practices, specifically this mineral liquor they called mumiyai.
Vigne associated it with asphaltum, or what they called Negro's fat, which oozed from the mountains. It was highly valued for its reported ability to heal bone fractures quickly.
And how is it administered?
The treatment was rigorous. You had to swallow a large pill of the mumiyai, repeat the dose, and then stick to a strict milk diet. Vigne heard so many stories from credible local sources that he admitted he was almost tempted to believe it, even though he'd never seen a complete cure himself.
It just shows that tension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Between his scientific skepticism and their profound local belief.
And that tension leads us directly to the ultimate cultural clash you witness.
Yeah.
The doctrine of predestination completely overriding basic medical care.
This is where his narrative gets genuinely dramatic.
It does. He tried to treat a young, stout relative of a man named Amir Khan who was suffering badly from fever and dysentery. The family was resistant to his current methods, but they finally allowed a small bleeding.
Only after a prayer was said over the patient.
Exactly. And the poor man feels this immediate temporary relief. So Vigne, knowing how dangerous dysentery is, begs them to keep the patient quiet, warm, and fasting.
But that's not what happened.
Not at all. The patient immediately insisted on eating, convinced he was starving, and as soon as Vigne was gone, the family and friends moved in with their traditional cures. This is where the cultural clash just explodes.
They were actively working against his advice.
Completely. They were pinching and massaging, mulling his limbs, tying scraps of the Quran around his neck, blowing over water for him to drink, even smoking paper with verses on it under his nose.
So they basically loved the patient to death with their constant interventions.
Yes. They were performing these intense, ritualistic actions to save him, even if the result was physically detrimental. When the young man died a week later, Vigne must have been preparing for tremendous blame.
But he was completely spared.
Entirely. Amir Khan's response was definitive and calm. He just said, it was his fate, and God so willed it, and nothing would have saved him. Vigne, the outsider, was exonerated because the ultimate outcome was already determined by a higher power.
So what does that profound acceptance of fatalism tell us about their ability to be such aggressive merchants?
Well, Vigne reflects that this doctrine that your fate is predetermined was brilliantly used by Muhammad to attract converts. By pairing this rigid fatalism with the prospect of a sensual paradise, he essentially neutralized the fear of death.
Which is the most powerful barrier to ambition or conquest.
Exactly. So if the outcome of a fever is already decided, you can face it calmly. And if the outcome of fighting the Viziris is already decided, you can fight with fierce dedication, ignoring the risk.
It allows them to be these intensely practical, aggressive capitalists on one hand. Vigne noted they were always keen to know the price of goods in London or Calcutta, while simultaneously holding this deep, abiding fatalism in times of crisis.
And they didn't see it as a contradiction. They saw it as two sides of the same powerful coin. Vigne's narrative is truly a unique window into a world where global commerce, ancient ruins, fierce independence, and profound religious belief dictated every single detail of daily life.
So our final provocative thought for you to consider is this. This tension between rigid religious fatalism and aggressive mercantile ambition allowed the Lohanis to not just survive, but thrive. If risk is irrelevant because the outcome is predetermined, how much more successful can you be in business or in life when you're facing what look like insurmountable challenges? Think about that tension and how that dual belief system shaped the world's most vital and most dangerous trade routes.